Okay, so we're going to talk about the 21st century stakeholders case study that we covered in class, I think last week. So that's going to be the first example we're going to look at to try and help you with your test. So we're going to look at the AO3 question that we sort of brainstormed in class. So if we look to the document to the left here, we'll look at that first, and then I'll do another instruction on types of exam questions or test formats that you can expect for the rest of the course on the past paper on the right. Okay, so but first we'll look at the document on the left, 21st century investors. Now we already know that this is an AO3 question because all you have to do, as we said last lesson, was look at the command terms, and in this case it's discuss and evaluate, a rare question that actually has two command terms in. That almost never happens. And this question was a bit rare in itself in that there wasn't a particular business to apply the answers to. So there's no particular business mentioned, whereas on the example on the right, there is always, well, I say always, most of the time, a business. The case study will just focus on one business, and then we can apply our answers to that particular business. Okay, so this was a bit of a unique case, but it was good to do because we were doing the stakeholder topic. So what we'll do is we'll just break it down into how to structure the answer, and then hopefully that'll give you an idea of how to do an AO3 question. Okay, so it says discuss potential conflicts between socially responsible investors of an organization and two of its other stakeholders. Evaluate the possible effects of these conflicts on the organization. So we know anyway that the command term asks us evaluate and discuss. They both ask us to build an argument, okay, looking at two sides, or for and against, or positive and negative, and then concluding the overall effect on the business, or the overall best option in the long term, or the most important point out of all of the ones that we've argued. So that is what we do with every AO3 question: build the argument and then conclude with the most important point or the biggest effect on the business. So in this one, we're going to discuss the potential conflicts between the socially responsible investors and two of its other stakeholders. So in that sense, we can build different viewpoints, different arguments. Okay, so we've got one argument that says a socially responsible investor will believe this, but this might conflict with another stakeholder because this other stakeholder might believe this. Okay, so let's just start off from scratch anyway, and we'll just build the answer. So first thing to do, as we've said, is to always define the key terms in the case. Now normally, in the question, you'd be there all day if you were defining every key term in the case. Now usually in a question, it's just one, maybe maximum two key terms. Okay, but it's important that we do define the key terms in the question because that naturally puts us in the top mark band because we are showing full understanding and using appropriate business terminology. Okay, so the terms in this question are socially responsible, okay, stakeholders, and conflicts. Okay, now socially responsible is actually defined in this case for us anyway. So we're actually going to leave that one out. It's actually up here. Socially responsible investing means, etc., etc. So we're just going to focus on really what the question is focusing on: stakeholders and conflicts. So potential conflicts here, and also we know conflicts here, and we know stakeholder conflict is a term. So we start off with the definition. Stakeholders are any person, group or organization with a direct interest in a business and the way in which that business operates. So once we show our understanding, as I've said to some of you who are worried about revising, you don't need to know the key term word for word. You just need to remember the main points of that key term so that you can show your full understanding, and that is what gets you the mark. You're not expected to remember it word for word, but you are expected to remember the main aspects of that definition to then put it in your own words to show your full understanding. Now, to show your full understanding, you want to try and put your definition in context. So we have the definition: stakeholders are any person, group, or organization with a direct interest in a business and the way in which that business operates. So now we want to try and build that definition up with a bit more understanding by trying to come up with an example that relates to the case. Okay, so go back to the case, and we could look at something that shows a stakeholder has a direct interest in the business. So socially responsible investing means to encourage companies to follow industry best practice. The idea is to have shareholders have more influence. Okay, so what we could say is an example of a stakeholder is a socially responsible investor who believes and tries to get businesses to behave in an ethical fashion. Okay, as it says in the case. So we use that example to back up our full understanding of the key term. The next key term is to define the stakeholder conflicts. So stakeholder conflicts are when one stakeholder's interests do not agree or conflict with another stakeholder's interests, and therefore cause disagreements when the business must decide which course of action or which stakeholder to appease. Okay, so now we've shown our understanding of the two key terms, and what we need to do actually is back up the second definition here with another example if we can. So we might have here the pay of those who manage socially responsible investments is below that of managers of funds without such investment restrictions. However, dividend returns from socially responsible investments in many cases match or exceed industry averages. Okay, so we have a sort of conflict between what certain managers might want to do and what other managers might want to do, depending on how socially responsible they are. Now, in actuality, we're going to be showing our full understanding of stakeholder conflict anyway throughout this case, okay, because that's what the case is about. So really, in the next paragraph, when we build our argument, we're already going to be showing our understanding of that key term. So we can leave that example for now because we're going to be building it in to our main arguments anyway. Okay, so discuss potential conflicts between socially responsible investors and two of its other stakeholders. So what we need to do is discuss what the interests of socially responsible investors might be, and then decide on another stakeholder that would possibly conflict with this interest, and talk about how these two interests are going to conflict, and then ultimately evaluate, show the effect that this might have on the business. And that's the key to remembering your answers. Everything is maybe or might happen. Never write this will happen, because we don't know for certain. Any question we're answering is theoretical. We don't know in practice if this is definitely going to happen. So any question you answer on the exam or on a test, you want to put may happen rather than will happen. Okay, so we'll start the argument then. Socially responsible investors are interested in seeing a business behave in ethical fashion that takes responsibility for their actions and the impact of these actions on the environment or communities These interests may conflict with, let's pick a stakeholder. As we said, there's many different stakeholders. So let's just say with current shareholders who are less concerned or have no concern for a business's operations and their impacts on the environment and or local community, and are more concerned / interested in increasing end-of-year profits for a business and subsequently increasing their dividend shares of these profits. Okay, so we can obviously see the difference in interest here. Certain investors might want to invest in companies or keep their shares in companies that are socially responsible, whereas other shareholders may not be socially responsible and care more about the dividends share of the profits. So they care about increasing the profits for the business. So we need to say this conflict, so we need to now evaluate the effect. This conflict may have a negative impact on a business as it will be difficult to appease both stakeholder interests in this case, and so upsetting or disagreeing with one of the stakeholders may result in that particular investor shareholder selling their shares, causing the value of the business to fall and giving it negative media attention as well. Okay, so there is one conflict